And so for this, we are gonna go ahead and we're gonna do the majority of him, not a full 3 circles, but we're gonna do the majority still. And then we're gonna have a tree in the background over to our left. So the first thing that I wanna do is I wanna think about where I want his head. Now, I don't wanna put it smack in the middle because again, if we want this tree to be seen, I want him to be just a little bit over to the side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by just kind of giving myself an idea of how big I want his head to be. I want to be able to fit a hat on his head as well. So we want to think about kind of how wide we want him. And I want to be able to fit the 2 more circles, but it doesn't have to be the full body. So the next thing I'm going to do, so you can kind of see where I've got my circle right now, and that's going to be his head. He's not going to be overly huge. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do a full circle. We're not going to start with my next circle right here. We want to kind of start up so that it looks like his head is actually sitting kind of inside of the other snowball. And so then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip my canvas as I need to. Drawing a circle is harder, so you want to take your time and you want to kind of figure out what you want to do. But he's also a snowman, so he doesn't have to be a perfect circle, right? But you can kind of see where I came down here. So he's kind of sitting inside of this next circle. And then the last circle, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make him even bigger. And he's going to kind of go off my page here. I'm not going to worry about that. And I want to make sure that I kind of line it up here so that it starts around the same point. I want him to be pretty even. So we've got him kind of off to this side. And if you see your whole snowman, that's perfectly fine. This is just what I'm doing. So we've got him kind of right there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show a little bit of the ground. And it's snowy out and it's kind of blustery, so it's made some kind of snow drifts there. So I'm not going to have it be a flat ground like that. And then I'm going to end up having that tree and that hat and all of that good stuff. But right now I want to paint my background first, because if I paint my background first, it's going to be a lot easier than if I draw my tree and I have to try and fill in, you know, all the way around it. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this part alone and we're going to fill in this background. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my biggest brush and I'm going to dip into blue. And then I'm going to dip into a little bit of white so that I can make a lighter blue. So I'm mixing it right on my plate here. So it's a nice light blue. And if I want to, I could even, and you don't have to do this, but we could mix a little bit of green by mixing our blue and our yellow, kind of adding a touch of that in there so it's a little bit more turquoisey even. Just for something different. You don't have to do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, again, I kind of want it to be more like a blustery. So I'm going to start just kind of swirling like this. And as I do that, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no way to make it wrong. I'm just kind of using circles here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dip into my white a little bit. And I'm just kind of, if you look, if I were to do it in slow motion, I'm kind of in some spots making like a 8. So you kind of keep pace with that. I'm just kind of curving it around a little. But the trick is, as you can see, like I just missed like this whole white section here. So as you're going, you want to keep going, but you want to make sure that you go through and you fill in all those spaces. And color change is fun as far as I'm concerned, so I like to be able to see streaks of different colors going through there. So you can see I've got blue and the white as I'm going. It's not all one color. As I get up to that snowman, I'm going to carefully kind of come in around him. But then see how it got kind of almost like a shadow? I want to blend that in. So I'm going to go back through and I'm going to blend it in. And you can't tell that I kind of outlined that. If you want to go with your smaller brush and outline it, you can. Otherwise, you can kind of turn that brush sideways here and pull it down like this. And then you pull that paint away. And then keep filling in those other spots. You just want to stay pretty consistent with what shape you're making. You don't want to make all X's over here and then, you know, loopy shapes over on the other side. So now looking at it, you can see a lot of dark over here. So I just want to go back through and just add a little bit of white. Not a ton. Blend it in a little bit. And then, like always, what we really want to pay attention to is making sure that this background can dry so that we can go through and we can add things on top of it. We've got that tree that we want to add. We've got the hat that we want to add, all of that good stuff. So we want to make sure that that's nice and dry. So what we're going to do while we're waiting for that to dry, one, we're going to look and we're going to see if there's any real thick lines of paint. If there's any thick lines of paint, we're going to go ahead and we're going to wash off that brush. I'm going to dry it off completely. And then you can go through and like I kind of see like some thick paint right here. You can tell based on the reflection of what's wet and what's not. And you can, without losing those brush strokes, you can kind of go back over it again. And that's what's going to spread it out. And then that's going to make it dry even faster. But again, you want to watch how you pull your brush because you don't want to have all of a sudden just a couple straight lines when you've got all these curves everywhere. So now that I did that, I'm going to go ahead and rinse out my brush. I'm going to make sure it's nice and super duper clean because we are going to use white. And we want to make sure that we've got the brightest white possible. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go with my biggest brush and I'm going to start filling in our snowman. Now the reason that I'm not super concerned about the paint being wet next to it, normally I say you don't want the paint to be wet next to it because you don't want it to mix together. In this case, it doesn't matter if it does because we're actually going to use a little bit of blue in the snowman. So it's going to be totally fine if it happens. I'm still going to be cautious so that I have a little bit more control over where it happens, but I'm not going to worry about it. So, and painting white on white is kind of tricky to see where you've already painted. So what you want to do is you want to turn your canvas in the light so that you can see if you see that little glare or that little reflection. And if you see that, then you know that that paint is wet. And you know where you've painted. And if you don't see it, likely you've missed a spot. And you want to go ahead and you want to fill that in. So I'm getting him nice and filled in. And I did go right over my pencil marks, but I can still see them, so I'm okay with that because I want to be able to see them for a couple different reasons. One, I want to be able to see where my line work needs to be. Two, it gives it kind of a gray tone, which kind of gives us a nice shadow and separator. All right, let's see. And then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to paint. Again, be careful because this is still wet, so I'm being very cautious with where I hold it. I don't want a big old thumbprint. And again, I'm not going to worry too much as far as if this blue gets mixed in. We're okay with that. All right, so now he's all white. The snow's white down here and over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that blue I put a little bit on my brush here, but then I'm going to go back into the white. And I want to barely see that blue. But then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come to the left. I've got it on my brush. I'm going to come to the left. And I'm just going to put it right on the bottom like this. And again, it gives us that little kind of shadow that we want. So hopefully you can see that. All right, so we just went from the left and kind of swooped it over this way. All right, then we can also add a little bit of that into the snow on the ground. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to completely rinse off that brush. Now the next part that we want to do is we want to be able to draw. So in order to draw, the paint needs to be dry. So we're going to give it a minute for it to dry really fast so that we can draw on it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on my tree and my hat and everything else now that everything is completely dry. So I should be able to touch anywhere on here and everything's dry. So what I want to do for my tree is, for me, I want to make it kind of a fun little tree. I don't want it to be just a straight up and down, you know, stick tree. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of curve it around, and it's going to kind of snake down here. And I'm just going to thicken it a little bit so that you guys can kind of see what I mean here. And I want it to be thicker at the base and then narrow as we go up. And at this point where we go up, it's kind of up to you how you want to do it. But when you branch off, you don't want to just come straight out. You want to kind of follow your line and kind of curve it around like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to follow the line again and I'm going to curve it out. But again, just like the trunk with the branches, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get thinner as we go towards the outside and thicker as we come to the base of to the trunk of the tree. And you just kind of want to play with it so that it makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to keep making my branches come out. And again, as long as you're not just coming straight out, it doesn't really matter where you go. Right here, I'm going to have another one come out like this. Maybe I won't take that one all the way up to the top, which means it's going to be super thin right there. So I'm not even going to widen that part. And then I just widened it here at the end. And then you can go ahead and you can do like a couple little branches here as we go like that. And then you can just kind of keep adding. I'm going to add a little bit of a thicker one since this one's pretty thick right here. It's a main branch there. And then I want to add another one right here. Like that. And then one more that I'm going to let curve kind of out as we go here. Like that. So it's more up to you kind of where you want them. But you want some smaller branches like this, some thicker main branches like this. And you just kind of want them to keep coming out like a Y. You can kind of see that Y shape in each one. All right. So we've got that going. So that's going to be what our tree looks like. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start drawing his hat. And I want it to be kind of like a top hat. And I'm going to come out on both sides like that. And then I'm going to make it narrow towards the head. So I'm not going to go, the way that you kind of want to do it is you want to see how wide his head is and you want to put it, you can put it off to the side, you can put it straight up and down, however you want. I've got it a little bit tilted. But you want to go right to about the width of his head. And then you want to kind of come out just a little bit for fun. And then you can go as tall as you want. And you can kind of curve the top of it. Depends on how fancy you want to make it here. So you've got like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a scarf. And the way that I'm going to make a scarf is I'm going to keep it pretty simple, where I'm just going to kind of make it a little bit wavy here. So as you can see, I came around, came down, kind of waved it around, came back down. But right here, you want to make sure it comes up here, because that's what's going to make it look like it's kind of being wrapped around here. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to make the little kind of tails of the scarf here. And you can make them however wide or however thin you want. You don't want to make them too thin. So you want to be a little bit cautious there. And then like that. And then I'm not going to worry about anything else on there. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put 2 spots for his little buttons. And then we're going to put 2 circles for his eyes. With his eyes, we want to make them as close to the same size and the same shape as possible. So take a few minutes and go and do as best as you can. And then the carrot, because we're looking right at it, it's just going to be a circle. All right, and then we're not going to worry about the mouth right now. So this gives us kind of what we want to have drawn. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to fill in certain spots. I want his hat to be red. You don't have to make it red, but I'm going to make mine red. I'm using my medium brush since it's not that big of a space. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to fill this in. So I kind of gave myself a little outline and then I'm pulling that paint away. Anytime you want to do that, you want to turn that brush sideways to do that. Okay, and then I want to do that little brim of the hat. So I'm turning my brush sideways because I don't want it to be super wide. I'm just going right across like that. Now I've got this thick glob of paint here, so I want to make sure that I pull that away so it's not too crazy. And I want to fix my edges so they're nice and smooth. So there's my hat. Now I'm going to go on to the scarf. And I'm going to keep it simple and go red, but that doesn't mean that you have to. And I'm just going to fill in those lines here. I don't want to go up too high on his head and cover his face. We want to be careful of that. And again, at any point, if you want to switch brushes, if you feel better with a different brush, you go ahead and do that. Just got that part in. I'm going to come down here. Again, turn that brush sideways and then pull it away. And I'm going to go ahead and rinse off that brush, and I'll give that scarf and hat more details later, but I want it to dry right now with that main part. I'm going to dry off that brush, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on his face. So I'm gonna roll my smallest brush into the black paint. I want all those bristles sticking together. I'm gonna steady my hand, and I'm gonna start by filling in his eyes. You want to try and keep them easy. Remember, the harder that you press with this brush, the wider your line is going to be. So if you want a smaller line, you want to go ahead and press lighter. If you want a wider line, you want to press heavier. And go ahead and do these little buttons. Like that. And then what I'm going to do his mouth. And to do his mouth, I'm actually going to, but I'm going to take the end of this brush, I'm going to dip it in here, and then I'm barely going to press it, and it's going to give me a little dot. If I have a lot of paint on here and I press really hard, it's going to give me a bigger dot. So you want to practice a couple of times on your plate because you don't want them to have too big. If you don't feel comfortable or it's not working out the way that you want to, you can use the smaller brush and do it that way. But for me, this way is easier. So I get just a little bit of paint on here and I come down and I figure out kind of where I want the center to be. And then I make my first dot, just like that. And then however many dots I do on one side, I do on the other side. So I've got 3 dots on the side of that center one. So I need to do 3 dots on the other side. I also want to try and space them out and raise them up like he's smiling. So again, you want to take your time and then you can get something like that. And always wash that off because otherwise you're going to forget that it's on there and you're going to get it on something. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start working on his carrot nose, which means I need to mix a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow, and that's going to give me some orange. And you decide how orange you want it. So if you want it more red or more yellow. And then if you want, you can even add a little bit of white. Soften it up just a smidge. And then you're just going to fill in that circle. Because like I said, we're looking right at it, so you're not really going to be able to see that it's a carrot. But we know it's a carrot because it's orange. You're going to fill in that circle. Just like that. All right, so now that I've finished his face, I can go back to his scarf, and his scarf for where I need is mostly dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the details down here. So I want to make sure my brush is nice and cleaned off and dried. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dip into my red paint with my smallest brush. And I'm going to paint a couple of little circles. I'm spacing them out. But I'm painting a couple of little circles at the edge. Like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the paint away. I'm going to put my brush down and I'm going to make a wisp. I'm going to put it down, pull away, and pull up. And what's going to happen is it's going to make these little wisps on the edge of the scarf, which I think are fun. And you don't have to do this detail, but this is something that I like to do. Like that. Then I'm going to darken my red just a little bit. Now again, black goes a very, very long way, so I'm going to barely press down. I've got some water on my brush here. You want to always make sure that brush is completely dried off or you're going to get water where you're not expecting it. So I'm going to take that little bit of black and I'm going to mix it right into some of the red here, just to darken it just a little bit. But see how I took just a small amount and look at how dark that's already making it. So you don't need a ton. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to the bottom of the scarf, like this. I'm not going to worry about like having straight perfect lines or anything. We just want it to kind of show that it's there. And then I'm going to add some of it in here. And it's just going to give it more like, kind of like a shading. So you can see that it's not flat. Kind of like that. And then I can even do it right on its hat too. On that brim, and then up in here. Just a little bit. Okay. I'm going to clean off that brush. I'm going to start working on my tree. To work on my tree, I'm going to need to make brown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make green first, because I need an opposite. And the opposite of red on my color wheel is green. So I'm going to make green first. And then I'm going to add some red to the green. And right now I can tell I have too much blue and not enough yellow because it's turning more of a purple than a brown. So I'm going to just add some more yellow here. And again, we all like different things, so you may find a different brown compared to me, and that's perfectly fine. You just want to find a brown that you're happy with. But you're going to make a fair amount because we've got to do the whole tree with the branches and everything. And then what I'm going to do too is I'm going to add a little bit of black, not a ton, but a little bit, to kind of darken that just a smidge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse that brush off because I'm going to use this brush. I'm going to dry it off really, really good. We want to make sure every part of it is dry so no water sneaks down. I'm going to actually turn my painting upside down because that's easier for me. You can do it however you feel more comfortable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that medium brush, I'm going to dip it into the brown. Now I'm only going to use this medium brush for the thick parts of the tree. As soon as I get to a thin part, I'm going to stop and I'm going to go to a different thick part. And then after I get all the thick part done, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get my smaller brush and I'm going to fill the rest in. So again, I'm going to turn my brush when I want to do that smooth line. Just like that. And again, if your tree isn't this thick and you need to go straight to your thin brush, you can do that too. It's most important that you're comfortable with what you're using. That's how your painting's gonna come out your very, very best. And just like with the small brush, the harder you press with your brushes, the wider your line's gonna be. So at the top, I'm gonna barely press down. And then as I come closer to the bottom of the tree, I'm going to press down harder because I want it to be thicker. And I want to fill in all those white spots. So again, as I come out to these branches, I'm going to start wider. And then I'm going to come thinner. Like that. And then as we start coming up in here, we're going to want to start being careful with how far we take this wide brush, because we don't want to go too wide anywhere. But these main parts of the tree, we still want to be pretty wide, because they're what's really holding up that tree. Okay, so now that I've got all those thick ones done, the main parts of my tree, first I'm going to go through, I can take a little bit of white and I can just do a little bit of highlights in here. So you can see there's really no rhyme or reason. I'm just putting down a couple of spots here that are a little bit lighter. When you think of a tree, it's not necessarily smooth, so you don't want to just go whoop with one smooth line. I'm going to rinse off this brush and I'm going to start working with my smallest brush again. And again, with the smallest brush, the harder we press, the wider the line. I'm going to roll into this paint, and I'm going to start down here, and I'm going to remember that as I come out, I need to lift up so that it's thinner. So right now it's pretty thick, but up here it's thinner. So I'm barely pressing down, and that's what's giving me that super thin line. Just like that. So again, it takes patience and it takes time. So if you're feeling like your arm needs a break or anything like that, you want to make sure that you take that break, shake it off, and get back started again. And I'm pressing harder as I come into that bigger branch. So same thing here, it's going to start out wider. But remember, none of these should just be coming out straight from the tree. We want it to curve. Like that. And then just a couple more spots. Curve out and lift up as I want it to go thinner. And then again, I can go into my white, lighten it up just a little bit. And you want to be really careful, but you can add those couple of highlights. And again, just touch a couple of parts on each branch. Just to give it the idea. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. It's kind of like that. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rinse out that brush. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to put some snow on that tree because it's going to be snowing here. So in order to put the snow on the tree, we need to have that brush completely rinsed out and dried off. I see a drip. And dried off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to roll it into the white. And we are going to go, you want to think about where the snow would hit the tree. The snow isn't going to hit underneath here necessarily. So I want to stay on all the top parts of the branches. And then you want to go a little bit thicker in where like the V's are, where the branches break off, because snow would likely pile up in there depending on how it's facing. So for example, I'm going to kind of fill some snow in here. I'm going to go a little bit higher on one side, and I'm just going to pile it in. It depends on how hard it's been snowing, right? So I'm going to do kind of all of these V's first. And some are smaller, so some are going to have more than others, and I'm not going to worry about it being a perfect line because that wouldn't necessarily happen with the snow. And kind of follow it up that branch a little bit. And then here's kind of a big spot that we can kind of put a little bit more in. Like that. And then see how it's kind of coming up this side more than it is the other side. So I'm going to have it come up on this side a little bit more too. So the wind must be blowing that way. I'll put just a little bit on the branches up here. A little bit along here. So you can put as much or as little as you want. Don't forget these ones down here. And then a little bit right in here. A little that kind of stuck to this side. And you probably have a little at the base. Kind of like that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. Now, if you wanted to, you could take the time and you could add like some Christmas flair or some holiday flair if you wanted to, but you don't have to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually make it snow. So I'm going to take the bottom of this brush again, and I'm going to dip it into the white, and I'm just going to start doing dots. Now I want them all to be different sizes, so I'm not going to worry if some are smaller and some are larger. That's a good thing. The larger ones are closer to us, the smaller ones are further away. And you decide how much you want it to snow. And we even want to put some in front of him so that we can tell that it is snowing in front of him. It didn't just stop where he is. Which also means we need to put some on his hat, like it's collected. that, and we can even put a little on each side here, if you wanted to. Like that.